What's up, everybody? How we doing today? All right. So quick question. Did you ever play as a kid the game Capture the Flag? Kind of feels like a common rite of passage. Well, when kids used to play outside, now they only go outside if their video game requires them to do so. It doesn't seem like something as common anymore. And I was a youth pastor for many of years, and this was kind of a youth retreat, youth camp staple that you'd play late at night. You'd always play a game of Capture the Flag along with another game called Steal the Bacon. Anyone ever heard of this camp game before? This one's a little wild. You'd take a water bladder, think like a water bed. You'd fill it up with water. You'd cover it in shaving cream. You'd hide a singular piece of bacon on the water bladder, and two kids would face off and run and fight for that piece of bacon. This game got crazy. Not only did it get crazy behind closed doors, what the camp counselors actually called the game was Skullcracker. So it's been canceled. Don't worry, we don't play that game anymore. But luckily, Capture the Flag isn't quite as violent, but it still gets wild, and we know the rules of this game. Two teams, each team has a flag, you hide your flag, and then you defend your flag at all costs. And I mean, it can still get wild, because seventh grade girls, you don't mess with seventh grade girls. They'll lay out tackling a dude, and I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen Inside Out too. There's a lot happening inside of a seventh grade girl. You don't want to mess with that. And so people have been playing Capture the Flag in lots of different ways, lots of different iterations for many of years. There's some wild versions of this game, but none as crazy as the one that Red Bull actually hosts every year. So why don't you watch this video really quick?
Çok hızlı ilerledi. Bedel gidiyor bu.
Yay! How many of you are thinking you would actually try that? Not a lot of, there's a few crazies in this room. All right. And what's funny is it's not like they're competing for $10,000. It was literally like bragging rights in a pack of Red Bull. That's what you win if you're able to do this. Well, do you know where the game Capture the Flag actually originated? It wasn't originally a game. The origin goes back to ancient battlefields hundreds of years ago, and far before we had radios to communicate on the battlefields, when there were soldiers and regiments and battalions out on the field, the flags became a vital point of reference that would be used to guide soldiers on the battlefields. Because of the noise and in the midst of the chaos and the smoke and the cannon fire, you would look to the flag as your rallying point to know where your other troops were, but it was also a rallying cry. This was who you were fighting for. And so you could see why now then during the Civil War, one of the most popular war songs that they would sing had this line that said, "We will rally around the flag." And with flags being vital to the success of military units, this made the flag bearer one of the most brave, or the bravest people on the battlefield, because maybe you've heard the old adage, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, they're literally carrying a stick during hand-to-hand combat. They're carrying a stick to the battlefield. So this would be wild that they would actually go out and bear this flag, which made them prime targets of the enemy, of sniper fire, of cannon fire. And so what would happen is everybody would rally around the flag. Everyone would guard the flag at all costs, because to lose the flag, well, this would be humiliating and potentially devastating for the organization of the troops on the field. And so you would see that fighting around the flag would be extremely intense. And if you look at the history of the Civil War, there's actually lots of stories centered around the bravery of those who would either cross enemy lines to go capture the flag. And as a matter of fact, in the newspaper at that time, it was a common practice to keep record of how many enemy flags were captured, or the stories of those who would defend the flag with their very life. There was a picture published in 1862 in Harper's Weekly, and it shows a soldier unconscious. He's been 3 times struck by enemy gunfire, and yet he's still gripping the flag. It illustrates kind of the power, the symbolism, the value of the flag. One of these famous stories is when there was a Confederate general by the name of George Pickett, and he led a charge at the Battle of Gettysburg against the Union Army at what's called Cemetery Ridge. And he thought, you know what, if we can get the jump on them, if we can rush them, then we'll catch them off guard and we can overcome them. Well, this actually ended up being a huge war, or a victory in the war for the Union Army, but there was a soldier at the time by the name of Caleb Jackson, and he provided this account that I'm going to read to you really quick of how the colors had fallen, and one man came and grabbed the colors to rally the men on the battlefield. So listen, when General Pickett made his famous charge, his men succeeded in striking our line, and for a moment it seemed that we would be overwhelmed. At this critical time, the last of our color guards was shot and the flag fell to the ground. Corporal Henry O'Brien, though not a member of the color guard, instantly seized the flag and waving it over his head, rushed ahead of the regiment and up to the muzzles of the Confederate army. His example was quickly followed by the rest of the men, and the Confederates were beaten back. He was struck in the head by a musket ball, and although stunned by the force of the blow, you think? He held to the colors until he was again struck in the left hand, but this occurred at the moment of victory. His action at this time was as fearless and daring as anything I saw during the war, and there is no doubt in my mind that it was one of the principal causes that led to the defeat of the Confederates. You see here that there is power in a flag. There's power in a symbol, in a standard that people will rally behind. There's power in a banner that has deep meaning to people. And to this day, we see people put flags and banners on their homes and buildings and cars to let people know, hey, this is what we stand for. This is what we care about. This is what we're proud of. This is what we're going to rally behind. And as you look to the American flag, to be a part of a color guard, maybe at a football game or when they wave a big American flag as they sing the national anthem, it's a great honor to be a part of that color guard, or to carry a flag at a parade or during a military funeral. You think of the Olympics. If you're chosen in the opening or closing ceremonies to be the athlete who gets to carry for the nation your flag and everyone's wearing the colors, that's a big deal. And it's always cool to watch everyone march in with their colors under that banner, proud to be a part of whatever nation that they're a part of. And so you may be wondering, okay, well, what's the Civil War and flags have to do with today? We're in a series where we're looking at the names of God. Well, first of all, you have to know that we're obviously not in a war, but that doesn't mean we don't find ourselves in a battle. As a matter of fact, throughout this room, there's many of us who are fighting a battle right now. Maybe some of you have come through a battle, or maybe some of you are facing a battle, but we are fighting and facing battles every single day. Some of us are facing a battle with our physical health. Some of us are facing a battle with our mental health. We're struggling with depression or anxiety. Some of us are facing a battle in our home or with our kids or with our family, or a battle for our marriage. Some of us are facing a battle with a sin pattern or with our addictions. And in many ways, and sometimes in ways that we don't necessarily like to talk about, or in ways that we don't fully understand, we are actually in a war. The Bible tells us that there's a spiritual war that's happening all around us with a very real enemy who would love nothing less than to pull you away from the Father. But if you know who you are fighting for, or should I say, if you know who is fighting for you, then you can be strong and endure even in the midst of the toughest battles. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to be diving into a narrative in Exodus chapter 17. You can open up your Bible app if you'd like to, and you can follow along. And today in this narrative, not only are we going to see our name for God today, but we're going to get hope for the battles. Either the battles that we're in or the battles that are yet to come. But before we dive into the narrative, let me give you a little background as to what's happening here in Exodus chapter 17. Israel has now been delivered from the rule of Egypt. They had been slaves in Egypt for over 400 years, about 430 years to be exact. And God called a guy by the name of Moses to come and deliver them. But Moses was a reluctant leader. He was pretty convinced that the people wouldn't listen to him, and Pharaoh wouldn't believe that he was sent by God. And so God shows up to call Moses on the backside of a hill, and God shows up in a burning bush, and they have this conversation about what God is asking Moses to do. And as God is speaking to Moses from the burning bush, he asks Moses a question. He says, "Moses, what is in your hand?" As he's on the backside of the hill, he's a shepherd right now. He's tending to some sheep, and so he has in his hand something that we don't know exactly what it looked like, but something that would be a shepherd's staff, to which he replies to God, "Well, I have a shepherd's staff." And God tells him to take that staff and throw it down on the ground, and so he throws it down on the ground, and that shepherd's staff turns into a snake, and Moses runs away, never to be heard of from again. That's how some of you would respond if you saw a snake on the ground. So what's he do? Then he reaches down and grabs the snake by the tail. He picks it up and it turns back into a staff. And what God is doing is he's showing Moses that I am the God that will make a way. If I've called you, I will equip you. If I've called you to do it, I will be the one who will make a way because I am. And this is what Tyler talked about in the first week of this series. I am Yahweh. I am the very breath of life. So Moses, you don't think you can do this, but I want you to know that I am whatever you need me to be because I am the one with the power. And Mo, your job, it's real simple. Just be faithful. Be willing to listen, be willing to obey, and let me do what only I can do. And so right here, there's a little bit of a mini lesson for us that we are called by God to use what God has put into our hand. You say, what do you mean? We are to be faithful stewards of our time, of our treasure, of our talents. And just whatever it is, even if we think it's ordinary, then God can do something extraordinary with the ordinary. God is the one who takes the natural and does the supernatural. And so if you're here today and you think, well, there's nothing special about me. I'm just basic. I'm just ordinary. God can't use me. I don't have unique gifts. I can't stand in front of a crowd and speak in front of people, or I don't have special abilities. I want you to know that makes you a perfect candidate to be used by God. Because the more ordinary you think you are, the more God's extraordinary power can shine through you so that he gets the glory. God specializes in using the ordinary to do the extraordinary, much like he used a shepherd's staff to do miracles. And you will see then as you follow the narrative of Moses, for the rest of Moses' earthly ministry, he always has that shepherd's staff with him, but it's no longer referred to in the Bible as a shepherd's staff. For the rest of his existence, it's referred to as the staff of God. And Moses would raise that staff with his hand to usher in miracles that would be on the behalf of the people. From the 10 plagues that happened to Pharaoh and the nation of Egypt to get Pharaoh to let the people go, to when then Pharaoh changed his mind and chased the nation of Israel through the Red Sea, Moses raised that staff and parted the waters of the Red Sea so that the people could be delivered from the hand of Egypt. And so we see in Exodus chapter 17 now, as we're jumping back into the story where we're at, that Israel has left Egypt and they are venturing towards the promised land. God has said, you're a new nation. I'm going to give you your own land. And as they're venturing now early in their journey towards the promised land, they make camp. And as they're making camp, they're a little tired, a little worn out, a little thirsty, and they begin to whine to Moses, much like a child does on a long road trip. They say, are we there yet? And that's what's happening. They're saying to Moses, hey, Mo, are we there yet? We're a little tired, a little thirsty. And so what does Moses do? He lifts that staff and he hits a rock and water bursts forth from the rock, giving them water in that moment to quench their thirst. And this is where we're going to pick up the story. But one quick caveat that I think is important for us to keep in mind, the staff itself was not a magic wand. Moses was not Harry Potter. Moses was not a wizard. Right? The staff itself did not have power. It was what the staff represented, or should I say really who the staff pointed to. Much like in ancient Rome, when you think of ancient Rome, the legions of armies would march into a city and they would hold a staff or a standard and it would have an eagle on the top. And what that eagle and that staff represented, the staff itself didn't have power, but it represented the power of Rome, and Rome indeed did have power. So verse 8, now we're going to dive in. While the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Moses commanded Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek for us. Tomorrow, I will stand at the top of the hill holding the staff of God in my hand. And so here's the nation of Israel. They just got some water. They're camping out. They're minding their own business. And these warriors sneak up on them and attack them. And it begs the question, who are these guys? Well, we know that the nation of Israel are descendants of Jacob, and Jacob had a brother by the name of Esau, and these guys are actually descendants of Esau. So that actually makes this group distant relatives of the nation of Israel. At this time, they happen to be a nomadic war tribe, and so think of these guys as grizzly fighters. Think Braveheart, wild hair, blue faces. They loved to go to war. Now, up until this point, keep this in mind. The nation of Israel for 400 years had been slaves. They had never fought in a battle before. So this would be their very first battle. Now you may think, well, wait a minute, Greg. Didn't they fight in Egypt? No, because God did it. God was the one who delivered them. They didn't have to fight. They just had to walk through the Red Sea. When Moses raised the staff, he opened the waters, and then the waters collapsed on the Egyptian army. But they're a nation now. And if they're going to be a nation, then at some point they would have to defend themselves, but they're completely unprepared for battle. I mean, they're tired, they're thirsty, they'd been slaves, they're only good with rakes, they're not good with swords. And if you're going to pick a time to have your first war, you don't want to go to war against a warfaring tribe, you'd want to go against the math tribe. It's like, where are the math nerds at? Can we fight them instead? Do we have to go against the Braveheart people? This seems like a losing proposition. And it'd be easy to think, like, just in general, Moses is there, he's got the staff of God. Why do we even have to fight in the first place? Moses, just do your thing. Raise your staff and let God come and wipe them out. Can't more water appear out of nowhere? Flood them again, hit them again. But what we see is that sometimes God will fight for us, and sometimes God fights with us. No two battles are ever the same. But as we're going to see in this story, the God of victory is. And here, man, is that rain? Holy smokes, it's really coming down. Can't do that to a guy with ADD. All right, anyways. So in this narrative, we don't just meet the Amalekites. We were actually just introduced to someone else, a guy by the name of Joshua. And this is the first time we're introduced to Joshua in the Bible. Now, many of us are familiar with who Joshua is. He would go on to succeed Moses as the leader of the nation of Israel. He even got to write his very own book of the Bible. But this is the first time we see him, and I want you to notice that he willingly goes to fight. He doesn't get orders from Moses and say, whoa, wait a minute, Moses. Let's chat this out here for a second. You're going to go up on the hill with a stick and I got to go down into the valley and fight? This doesn't seem very fair. Let's trade places. I'll take the stick. I'll go up to the hill. You can go down and lead the people. But Joshua doesn't do that because Joshua knew what that staff in Moses' hand represented. And so let's continue verse 10. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed to the top of a nearby hill. Wow. Maybe we all just need to pray. Lord, I don't know what's happening out there. I'm glad we're in here, though. That much I do know. All right, I'm going to try to get through this. You got to bear with me. As long as Moses held the staff in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whenever he dropped his hand, the Amalekites gained the advantage. And so this is just a wild story, by the way. Joshua, he goes down into the valley to fight. Moses, Aaron, and Hur, they go up to the hillside. Aaron was Moses' brother. Many scholars believe Hur was his brother-in-law. We actually don't know that. The Bible doesn't tell us that, but that's who they believe it is. So they climb the hill, and we see that as long as Moses had the staff up, the nation of Israel would win the war. As long as then the staff came down, they would begin to become overcome by the Amalekites. And you have to wonder, was he tempted to ride the roller coaster with the people? Hey, whoa, hey. No, he wouldn't do that. He would never do that. But what we see here in this moment is a powerful picture and illustration of the power of prayer. As a matter of fact, this might be one of the clearest, most significant pictures of prayer that we have in the entire Bible. To ancient Hebrews, raising your hand was the posture of prayer, and it was also a posture of surrender. To us, the posture of prayer, we tend to do what? We bow our head, or we maybe get down on our knees, or we close our eyes, or fold our hands. But this idea of raising our hands isn't completely foreign to us. We do it, we see people do it in worship, but this is a symbol of what? When we raise our hands, it's a symbol of victory, which is something they'll never do at a Bears game ever again. Can't ever win a game. These guys are driving me nuts, but that's okay. So it's a symbol of victory. It's also a symbol of surrender. I give up. And so that's why when we worship, sometimes you may wonder, why do people raise their hands during worship? Why are their hands up? Well, it's saying, God, I surrender or God, I've got the victory in you. And so here we see that Moses is reaching out to God. He's interceding on behalf of the nation of Israel. And as he's praying on the hill, it directly correlated to the battle in the valley. So there was a physical battle that was being fought, but they also fought this battle in a spiritual way. And so in the same way, when we fight our battles, we have to know that the practical and spiritual battles are connected through prayer. The practical and spiritual battles are connected through prayer, which means we shouldn't just start swinging a sword at our problems without going to God first for maybe the ability or the strength to swing the sword, or maybe better yet, the wisdom as to where we should swing the sword. Because we will always tackle the problems of earth best when we touch heaven first. You will tackle the problems of earth best when you touch heaven first, because you are calling down the power of heaven into our realities. Thus, prayer will alter how you approach your problems. Prayer will alter how you approach your battle, and it impacts how God approaches the battle, because he wants us to invite him in to our problems through prayer. He's asking us to do that. However, just because we call a Holy Spirit airstrike down into our problems, it doesn't change the fact that there's still a ground war. Joshua still had to go into the valley to physically fight, which means prayer does not eliminate the practical work that we have to do. It simply guides it, or better yet, it empowers it. And when we find ourselves doing our work and trying to follow God and obey God and doing the toil that it takes to do the right things in the midst of the battle, it can take a toll on us, can it not? And when the battle tends to go longer than we anticipated, the struggle or the fight's a little harder than we anticipated, then prayer itself, the pressure of intercession can take a toll on us. We see this with Jesus. He's about to go to a cross. Before he does, what's he do? He goes and prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. He is in anguish. He's fighting as he prays. He's praying so hard he sweats blood. He's asking people, his disciples, will you pray with me? Please, I need your support in prayer. Will you join me in prayer? And what happens? He gets up and he sees his disciples are sleeping. He's like, you couldn't stay awake and pray with me? I'm at the edge of what will be my darkest moment in my life, in human history, and you can't pray with me? To which he said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Sometimes it's a fight to pray. You got to fight. You got to stay at it. But what this story shows us is that it matters. Even when we're weary, we got to keep pressing towards heaven. And what we see now from this story is that Moses, he gets weary. He does get tired. Verse 12, Moses' arms soon became so tired, he could no longer hold them up. So Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. Then they stood on each side of Moses, holding up his hands. So his hands held steady until sunset. As a result, Joshua overwhelmed the army of Amalek in battle. You see, when you find yourself fighting, could be for your family, could be your mental health, it could be that sin pattern. Many of times when you're in the middle of the fight and you've been fighting for a while, you may not see the progress that you want to see. It may seem like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. The waves and the hits of the fight just keep coming. And because we're not robots, we are human beings with a soul, eventually we do tire. We wear out. And so we need to know that battles are won with the help of other people. Battles are won with the help of other people. No matter how strong you think you are, no matter how talented you are, you were not designed by God to face your battles alone. Think of it this way. You look at Moses for a second. Arguably, there has not been up until this point one person who was closer to God. There's not one person who knew God more. I mean, he literally got to experience God and get the 10 Commandments. He knew the heart of God. He knew the will of God. Nobody was closer to God than Moses. And yet, Moses himself, someone who was uber connected to God, still needed others to stand with him, still needed others to support him. He was fine for a while on his own. But eventually, human nature sets in and he began to falter, and he had the help he needed to get him through. Remember, 20 or so years ago, and as I was preparing this message, this image jumped into my head of something that shows us the power of people coming together and helping one another. And maybe you'll remember this as I begin to talk about it, but there was a young girl by the name of Natalie Gilbert. She was 12, 13 years old, and she had won a competition to sing the Star-Spangled Banner at an NBA playoff game. And this is a big deal for a 12 or 13-year-old girl. And so she's standing alone there in the midst of this crowd, nationally televised game, and she begins to sing, and she starts very strong, and very quick into the song, she begins to falter. She begins to flub the lyrics and forget the words, to which the coach of the then Portland Trail Blazers, so you can now see how old this is, that team doesn't exist anymore, Maurice Cheeks, came alongside her to lift her up. Well, we edited this video down for the sake of time, but I actually wanted you to see this, so take a quick look.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the star's light, stars. Stars light, last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
What was a very painful, scary moment turned into a beautiful picture of people coming together to support one another. And did you see what she mouthed to him at the very end? Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. It was because you were willing to come and stand with me in the middle of a battle, and that was a battle. That's adversity. You were willing to stand with me. You were able to help me get through it. And in the same way, you know how we get through our battles? Together. We need each other. We need people who are willing to help us finish our fight, to stand in the gap with us, to when our arms are tired and when we don't have the prayers to pray anymore, that they're willing to hold our arms up and pray with us, to let us know that we're not alone, which means you've got to surround yourself with the right type of people. People who will jump in and help you when they see a need. People who are willing to pray with you. People who are willing to sit with you. People who are willing to talk with you. People who are willing to stand with you. People who are willing to be around you. But notice something from this story. You have to be intentional. Moses went up to the hill, and when he went up to the hill, he brought Aaron and Hur with him. He didn't need them right away, but he knew he would need them eventually. He was intentional with the people he surrounded himself with. And in the same way, it's your responsibility to surround yourself with people who will be there for you, which means maybe for some of you, you need to get out of a row, which is great. I'm glad you're here, but this helps you connect with Jesus. But maybe you need to get into a circle so that you have people around you who know you and know your story and can support you. Maybe you need to join a team so you can start building community. Maybe you need to get better friendship groups around you. Maybe when we say, hey, go pray at the end of the service, you take us up on that and you go over there to that cross and you pray with somebody because you've been carrying a secret or a burden or a battle alone for far too long, and you need the support of someone who's going to come alongside you and say, hey, we can fight with you. I will pray with you. I will stand in the gap with you because we were made to support one another. And so we see from this story, as a result of Moses is praying and Aaron and Hur are doing the supporting and Joshua, he's in the valley fighting, that this ragtag group of tired, worn out, thirsty travelers who had just been delivered from slavery win their very first battle. But it would be the first of more battles that would be yet to come. And maybe that's why God gives these instructions to Moses in verse 14. After the victory, the Lord instructed Moses, write this down on a scroll as a permanent reminder and read it aloud to Joshua. I will erase the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And this is the first time we see the command from God to his people to write something down in the entire Bible. He wants them to remember, because remembering is important in our faith journey. But he wants us to remember not only what he did, but also remember, hey, this enemy, they've been defeated. So that if this enemy tries to rear its head again, you can know that God already got the victory over them. And in the same way, maybe you don't write down all that God does for you or what God has done for you, but you do need to remember and remind yourself, maybe in the midst of your battle or when the enemy tries to rear his head in your life, that he's been defeated, that sin and death have been defeated, that they don't have a hold on you anymore, because the battle tests of today will be battle testimonies tomorrow. The battle tests of today will be battle testimonies tomorrow. What you're going through right now, this too shall pass. God will either get you through it or he'll help you defeat it, but either way, he will remain faithful in the fight. But you have to remember who you are fighting for, or better yet, you need to know and remember who is fighting for you. And so what did the people do after this huge victory? Verse 15, Moses built an altar there and named it, here's our name of God, Yahweh Nissi, which means the Lord is my banner. Finally, right? We see the name of God. Some of you are like, is he ever going to get to the name of God this week? There it is. Yahweh Nissi, the Lord my banner. The root word for Nissi means to be raised up, lifted high, like a flag or like a banner. And what you see is that Moses on that day was the flag bearer for the nation of Israel. He lifted high the staff of God over the people, and it was the standard and the symbol that represented the power and the presence of God in their life. And so they rallied around it. They fought for it as God also fought with them. And the Amalekites probably saw this guy on a hill with this staff, and they're like, what is he doing? But these people, they won't quit. They won't stop. They don't get tired. They keep fighting. What did we get ourselves into? Because God was the reason that they fought. Yahweh Nissi, the Lord is my banner. He is our why. And what's amazing is I can't help you look at this story. I can't help but see Jesus all over this story. We see Jesus in Moses as our intercessor. Some of you maybe are sitting here right now, and as you're facing your battle, you're like thinking, nobody knows my struggle. Nobody's praying for me. Well, I want you to know that the Bible tells us that Jesus is seated at the right hand of God. And do you know what he's doing for us right now? Making intercession for us. God of the universe, all things created through him and for him, the Son of God, Jesus himself, is praying for you. So if you think nobody else cares, nobody else is praying for me, right now, Jesus is interceding on your behalf. We see Jesus in Aaron and her as our supporter, because he is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. When we are weak, he is strong. He is the one who has our back. We see Jesus in Joshua. Did you know that Joshua and Jesus are actually like related twin names? They both come from the same root Hebrew name of Yeshua, which means God is salvation or God saves. And Joshua, in many ways, he's kind of a precursor to Christ. When you read about Joshua, it points a lot to Jesus, but Jesus is the one who will fight for you. Jesus is the one who will go into the valley, into the battlefield, because he went into the valley of death. He went to the cross to fight for you. He was the one who saves us. And finally, we see Jesus as our staff that represents God's presence and power. As Moses lifted his hand up to the sky, raise that staff up. Jesus lifted his hands. He was put on a staff. He was put on a cross, willing to die to become our standard, to become our why, to let us know that he has the ultimate victory over sin and death. He is the one who leads us out of slavery, the slavery of our past, the slavery of our fears, the slavery of our battles. He's the one who takes us out of our Egypts and brings us into the promised land. He is leading us every single day further and closer to glory. He is the one that's brought us in and made us a part of a new nation. So if you need to know your why, if you need a standard, if you need a flag, if you need a banner, then he is Yahweh Nissi. The Lord is my banner. He is what motivates. He is what inspires. He's the reason I'm here. He's the reason I won't stop. He's the reason I won't quit. He's the reason I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to do it for him. That's my why. Let me pray for you. God, as we go into this moment and we sing, there's so many people in this room right now that I know are going through struggles and battles and fights. And when we're in the midst of the struggle and the fight, it can feel exhausting sometimes. But when we look to you and look to your cross, knowing you endured for us, that you fight for us and with us, and we fight for you, knowing that you're standing by our side, let that be the inspiration we need to endure our battles. That you are Yahweh Nissi. You are our banner. You are our purpose. And so we sing now to you, knowing that you are our why. In the name of Jesus I pray, amen.